Hi. This week I'm calling it Where May You Have Fallen Through the Cracks. Now keep in mind while you listen to the sessions that were had that the card that was pulled is peace. Ultimately, we don't know when we fall through the cracks because we wouldn't have fallen through the cracks if we knew we were falling through the cracks. Sometimes it layers over the lifetime to where you are, and sometimes it's lifetimes. And we can't always see in this lifetime the vastness of the momentum that has taken place when we've fallen through the cracks and literally don't realize it. Peace is the outcome. Once it's seen, peace is the outcome. So it started off during the week with a session where great effort had been put into looking at what can be done, where can it be moved, what's the next thing I can integrate, because the ideas and the desire are continuously in process. And what was seen was that's a lot to have on the plate. And the criteria is a time factor. It's not that they're not possible. It's more how are you allocating it in a way that you don't feel that you're in the same roller coaster that never stops, because it's the roller coaster that is draining, that isn't joyful, that ends up not satisfying. Where if time's allocated, a peace arrives that feels I can enjoy the process of each bit, and as one gets in place I can bring something, but it's about peace was in the having time, because all of that was happening in the hope to get time. So it's best to start with the allocation of time to begin with and allow the rest of the process to grow. And we can fall through the cracks and never have time and not realize that doing more won't give it to us. The next one was falling through the cracks can show up in not being able to see yourself properly, to the full heartfelt integrity that you are, that's invisible to others. And they put onto you what goes wrong, what should be your responsibility. That showed up a couple of times actually, interestingly enough. And then to boot, when finally you speak up, it goes, the message comes back, people see you as bipolar. When in fact, the patience is so long, so enduring, so giving. It takes a long time to come to the point where it goes, enough. And of course that was called bipolar. So it was really the overviewer that started to speak and said, you are not intolerant. It's just it comes to a point where from the core of yourself you have to speak. And the falling through the cracks was to do with taking on what other people had said. You fall through the cracks if you get upset by them seeing it that way. I know myself, I can be quite passionate about things, and it can come across as anger, irritation, or whatever it is. And if that's thrown at me, I very much do the this is what clarity looks like. And I feel so clear in myself, this is clarity. And I just happen to speak it very strongly. Do not fall through the cracks with what others label you as. So, the two of the sessions that we had this week were very much to do with lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of having a particular pattern. And they're not as easy to break as you think, because even the spiritual aspect of yourself ends up being tied into that. A bit like certain families that people keep coming through with certain skills that they keep entering into. It becomes a deep groove that continues to be followed, and to come out of that is not always that easy. It's falling through the cracks on a whole new level. And this being has, and it showed up many times, this aspect of being an ambassador. And when you're an ambassador, you're really not at some level you're not yourself. You're always the in-between peacemaker, or you're really trying to bring something about for others. And what had happened is that falling through the cracks was so completely other-orientated, with the skill of actually seeing things with others, but what can you do with it? And it came down, what can you do with it? There's no action to be taken that comes from yourself in that. And we can fall through the cracks to be so other-orientated that we forget to actually take it back to ourselves and say, what do I want to do next? This going into action with not carrying the thoughts in a myriad of ways that swallows you up, that prevents you from doing that. Because it can feel so important. When it could be, go look at your plants, go for a walk, go sit, look at the clouds. What do you want to do next? Let's go do X, Y, Z. And the peace that comes from that. We can also fall through the crack by continuously coming from a spiritual capacity. And a being came who was so dedicated to an activity for another that it kept going to the spirit for it, going to the spirit of it, going to the spirit to be able to keep it going, to the point that the spirit itself got so used to making it okay, it didn't know when it wasn't okay anymore. And we can be so in the spirit that there's no movement left in life. And towards the end of the session, it was quite interesting, because it was like the spirit itself said, drop the spirit, it's never not here. And it was great, because there was a sense of feeling present at the end of the session and wanting to go do things which hadn't happened for a long time, because people who are like that, it takes a very long time for them to come and have a session to begin with. And interestingly enough, she didn't come for herself. She came for her dog that was losing hair, who was actually surrogating for her. And in the non-movement, nothing was moving in the body and the hair was falling out. You know? But it was so wonderful to see the lights come on and this sense of laughter and wanting to move on again and completely getting it and realizing that she had fallen through the cracks, and it was great to get back on board. So another being falling through the cracks had to do with this great desire to be productive. And to be productive and not have an outlet for it, what can happen is we can go so deep, we get so depressed and so lost, and so we can fall into feeling almost immobilized out of the desire to be productive. Where realizing you are productive, it then knows that that will take place, because no way is what I'm feeling not productive. I'm staying with that productive. And then again, it's with the view of that, being productive is getting on with the day, doing what you want to do until that which you are waiting for is known to come. So we can actually fall through the crack of desiring to be productive, which immobilizes us. Another being that came on a recommendation of somebody else. Go and see Jose. So anyway, she did, and I'm very grateful. And this was a situation where, having a very strict upbringing, that doing what one is supposed to do, or just continuously being there for others, because reference to self was not something that was encouraged in the younger years. So, brilliant job, raising kids, running them around, doing all that there is to do, but at some point it runs dry, and there is a non-movement of self in it, which actually ended up having dire consequences, which then had to be remediated, and now of course needs to be looked at, like what is all of this. And it was rather lovely, because it was, little simple things like, your children have 2 hands, your children have 2 feet. Remind them, you've got 2 hands, you've got 2 feet, you can do it. Simple things like that frees one up, and it's like this sigh of, I feel more myself. So that's not a time for big decisions. That's more a time of staying with that, activating and actioning a normality rather than a doing to make it normal on a continual basis. That's at some point not normal for yourself, and you realize you've fallen through the cracks, and how to then action this activity moving forward. And when things feel more self and more normal, maybe then you can see what the next action is. Instead of thinking taking this action is going to change anything. No, it's a bit like you can move house, but you're still the same being if you haven't really altered some of the behaviour. You just bring everything with you. So she could see it, and she could also see with great humour how that could, because we had a great laugh about all the different things that could be done and said and seen, and how to be with it. So, when you can see you've fallen through the cracks, you can have a great sense of humour about it, and how you're going to correct it according to yourself, until it is seen by the others. Of course, it's not going to be convenient for the others. We know that. But it serves them also not to be enabled. It serves them to also take action. A bit of resilience, a bit of doing things you don't necessarily want to do, and to keep our children comfortable with not having them do anything they don't want to do. I don't think it's serving anyone. That itself is letting them fall through the cracks. So the last being I saw, it was actually pretty heavy, because this was one of those massive lifetime ones where coming into 3D, there was this desire to be challenged, to have a challenge. But that challenge had happened over multiple lifetimes. And like, how can I, with all the capacity that gives one, all the extraordinariness that one achieves out of a challenge, but when challenge itself becomes nigh impossible to find a challenge, can you imagine how extraordinarily difficult you're going to have to make it? And that had happened in a multitude of ways, emotionally, physically, financially. It was amazing. Like, if I can find a crack for a challenge, and they just layered and layered and layered to the point it became unbearable, but because its whole energy was for a challenge, it felt there was no way out. And the future looked like impossible, and it had decided that I can already see that this is going to happen to me, like at this point on a physical level, like locking it in. And of course the locking in is the challenge, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it was seeing that an incredible productive energy, and changing the word from challenge to productive. Now we can come from an inner integrity moving forward to work out what is productive. It's a massive shift, because it had driven to such a point, there was no moving in this element of challenge, and it now needed to see how moving forward was in that element of productivity. Totally, one has peace in it, because the capacity for being productive was a given from the challenges. So there is a time for challenges, so that knowing that, you then can be productive with what that has given you. It shows you the capacity to move forward, and we don't fall through cracks when that's the process. So the card that was pulled was peace. Relax, slow down, meditate, reflect, be peaceful. You do not have to fix everything right now, this minute. But it may be time to resolve your inner conflicts and create peace, and that showed up in every session. Take time to peacefully be with yourself without any external noise or the hustle bustle of everyday life. Be gentle and peaceful. Be gentle and peaceful in your communications, that includes yourself. Do not force the issue, neither can you try to create peace. You must simply allow it. And that was the only card that was pulled, and the other two sort of showed up in the background, and it's quite interesting because the ones that showed up is that peace reflects in worthiness, and then magic shows up. The Australian bush essence that showed up was, I love the name of this, Dog Rose of the Wild Forces. The negative is fear of losing control, hysteria. And it did get to that point. Pain with no apparent cause. And the positive outcome is calm and centered in times of inner and outer turmoil. Emotional balance. and a lot of people are feeling much chaos in the world that will toss. Cultivate that core. Pause, find yourself, go to that place of peace. Wishing you much peace and much love.